Hello again. Thank you for joining me and watching the series of my Lady in Blue journals. This particular journal is Lady in Blue with black lace, and I think I'm calling her Cerulean. I love the black and the gold. It is so elegant and so rich. And of course, we've got this stunning image that I've made a tag or a topper with. It is called The Soul of the Rose by John William Waterhouse. So famous and so beautiful. And I do love the touch of turquoise or teal. I almost used teal colored buttons on the spine, but I went with black because I just felt if you take off the turquoise tie, then you can make any color of tie go with this journal. It would look beautiful with the gold as well if you choose to use that instead. So there she is, and I've added some antique applique there. It's really delicate. I had to cut a lot of the threads off of it that it had been attached to a different garment. Quite often, you know, we buy things and we repurpose them when lace has been used by something else. Sorry, I'm just taking a second to cut these off. And I backed the image onto some folder. Is it a folder? Yeah, like a manila folder, only it's craft colored, just to give it some strength. And I have used my crinkled gold satin as layering, and this beautiful, beautiful teal in the back. And the name is Lady in Blue. So that is the topper for this journal. We've got gorgeous antique French lace in black that I draped on the bottom, and I have a lot left over, but I only had 2 corners and I wanted to make them as sheer as possible, so I just felt it showed off the lace better than if I layered it and layered it and layered it. And then what I did to add a little bit of strength and support to it was add this, and I've got that in my travels from somewhere. I'm not exactly sure where I got it, but it just blended so beautifully, I thought, with this series. And then the black and gold braided trim with the bead dangles, had to use it. It almost reminds me of the flappers, like the 20s or something. I just think it's so feminine. Beautiful. So this we will put to the side. And the cover is, it feels like it's got a pile to it. So it's like almost a crushed velvet brocade tapestry. And the beautiful beads on the side. Let's go and have a look inside. The digitals that I primarily used for this kit are called Lady in Blue. And that's what inspired the name for this series that I used, was Lady in Blue. I just thought it sounded so romantic and feminine. And there she is. Coordinates very beautifully with this image. Turquoise or teal and black, primarily for this journal. I didn't use a pocket. I didn't create a pocket to this inside cover because this is vintage wallpaper, and look at this image, how striking. I need to shout out to my sweet friend Sharon. She gave us a little gifties, and this beautiful wallpaper was inside, and I love it so much. I knew it would be perfect in this project. It is just stunning, and I didn't have the heart to cover that up with lace, so I've just used the bulldog clip here for adding the ephemera to the side. So I've got another one of these envelopes that I've made with the antique sand texture paste, tea-dyed, and then the fiber trim to wrap it up like a gift. A booklet with the vintage applique, seam binding, a vintage lady image, and different textures of paper. I've got parchment paper, granite paper, and the little threads on the embroidery floss have these beads, dangles on the bottom, and a fold out flap here. And this one I am naming Cerulean, different shades of blue. So she goes back together like so. Just give me a minute. And then I've just used paper vertically instead of landscape or portrait, if you want to call it that, and just folded them in half. So this is just a standard tall skinny journal. Added some beautiful blue lace to the side image there. And I've got a vintage lady with some vintage book page from Les Miserables, some collaging of other papers, and the seam binding, tying the index card on the back for extra journaling. Some of Sheila's beautiful lace. Look at that. Isn't that just so perfect? I love it so much. Stamping, vintage sheet music, washi sticker. Like I said, various shades of blue. Here's the back of my butterflies. So the same butterfly effect again in the layering of the silhouetted die cuts. And I've added glitter, of course. And I just think they're so special. Again, I came up with this technique a couple of years ago. I have used it before, but I just think it's so sweet. I just love it. Beautiful images from the kit. And I've got a vintage lace fabric swatch tag. I've added the word vintage to the top here. And let's take this off. Some beautiful fibers, some of Sheila's beautiful embellished sequin trim, vintage lace swatches. You can, like I said, remove these, reuse them, just move it around, do whatever you would like with it, but they are generous pieces. And that is artisan paper that it is backed onto and then stitched all the way around. So I love to make these. I think they are just a beautiful addition to every journal. Gorgeous vintage lace on the side here in the two tones, and I have threaded some vintage silver or gray cording trim through there. Very, very, very tiny, probably 1/8 of an inch. It's a little bit painstaking to do so, but I do use my threaders, my floss threaders to get that through. I think I've got one here. Yes. If you use one of these, if you can see that, and just thread it through and pull your trim, it makes it so much easier. Otherwise, it's very hard to manipulate the trim through there. Tall tag, backed onto parchment paper, some vintage blue lace at the top of the, or the bottom of the page here. And another tag that I've created using some layering techniques with the vintage wallpaper, the antique sand texture paste, some vintage scarf, and some of Sheila's bling and stamping. And then backed onto scrapbooking paper for extra journaling space. Gorgeous crochet trim. I leave it raw on the edge because I love that frayed look. And as I've mentioned previously, I sewed these journals mostly with black thread, which can be trimmed if you would like, or just left as it is. Vintage wallpaper that's flocked, vintage book page, some Locta paper, collaging with some stamping, and a wildflower die cut. Lined journaling paper, and here's a vintage or antique. Let's see. Oh, that's right. This one didn't have a date. I'm gonna say it's 1911 or 17, so it's got to be antique. I did buy them as antique, and it is of Highland Park Lake in Dallas, Texas. Just beautiful colors. How pretty is that? Some stamping, some vintage textile ruffling on the side. Here I've used the bookend paper again to make a tall tag for some journaling space, and one of the images from the Arabella kit from Paper Cameo that I've used as a heart journaling card. This little spread has some gorgeous crocheted lace that is edged with and decorated with blue cotton threads. It's just so lovely, and I draped it on both sides of the page. I will tell you though, if you do that technique and you're using textiles that flow through the center of your journals, it is a lot more difficult to sew the signatures into the spine. So if you haven't tried it before, just be prepared to be patient when you're stitching, because it is very thick to try and sew through. Tag that I've got using some beautiful vintage wallpaper, vintage crocheted lace, and beautiful antique applique. This is from Lavish Laces, and this sweet little mother of pearl button from Susie. Backed onto the parchment paper. What I did here too was I have some vintage or antique silk, very soft aqua trim, and I just felt it really coordinated well with this page, so I threaded it through the insert part there. Some stamping, of course, of the roses. And I've got a tall tag, or not a tall tag, sorry, a journaling tag that I have made using very soft blue vintage lace and some blue tatting, beautiful teal colored seam binding with the black vintage buttons with the rhinestone bling inside. It's German vintage book paper and a beautiful image of a vintage lady. I believe those ones are from G. Kerr. I just have a folder that I've got all kinds of vintage ladies in there. So half of them I go by memory of which kit they are from. If I don't always get it right, it's not intentional to do that as an oversight. This little flap contains this beautiful crocheted zigzag trim. I just love it so much. And a journaling card from Tim Holtz, some stamping, another beautiful washi sticker, tea-dyed paper, a tall tag made from Edith Holden book page, backed onto parchment paper, and another tag that I've made from the previous journal collection, one of the previous journal collections I've done. And this is more of a greeny blue page spread, just extra space for journaling. Here we've got one of the beautiful antique French black lace tags that I created with this vintage teal lace and this beautiful vintage trim with the braided satin. It's just so beautifully designed. And of course you can use that as a tuck spot as well if you have something you would like to add. And I did use black stitching for most of these journals, pages, and tags. Some of Sheila's beautiful embellished trim. Sometimes when you're looking at your bundles and you go, oh, I love that piece, but how would I use it? Something like this comes up and it is the perfect complement to this page set here. So I just was so pleased to be able to add some gold of her embroidered blingy pieces to each journal. This is another lace. I believe it's from vintage or Lavish Laces again. And I've just veiled it through both sides of the cover insert here, which is Edith Holden book page. I have used black and gold beads on these strings and I love them. They are just stunning. If you are going to be the recipient of this journal, I would suggest adding probably this and maybe this. And those would be your blingy pieces, if you don't mind really long dangles on your journal strings, which I love, absolutely love. And then I can also tie a little piece of, what do you call it? Seam binding, crinkled seam binding to the dangles if you would prefer. That's what I've been doing lately. That's my special little technique. I love adding the seam binding ribbon to the bottom of the dangles. This would be Susie's beautiful dyed lace. embossed tuck spot here with a small journaling card and some stamping. Gorgeous journaling card that I have distressed on the edges. This is a beautiful rose from Odolcina's collection called Herbal Garden. I thought it complemented this page on the left side so beautifully with the green and the cream. Gorgeous crocheted lace. This is from Sheila as well. And a journaling card from Edith Holden book page, backed onto parchment paper. Some stamping, some more stamping. Journaling card made with Vintage Lady from Ruby and Pearl. I've got the Vintage Ladies 1 and Vintage Ladies 2, which you've seen throughout this collection. Some crinkled seam binding, some vintage book page in Les Miserables, and backed onto an index card that I've hole punched so that I can do the double bow tie. You could add buttons to that as well, or beads, whatever you'd like, but I felt that it was special enough with the 2 bows. The other side of this beautiful vintage crocheted lace with the antique silk ribbon laced through there. This tag I created using artisan paper and vintage sheet music paper with the scalloped topper. Just tucks in there nicely and backed onto parchment paper. I've added a little dangle on a bulb pin. And this side is more blue and green again. I've got a tall tag made from Edith Holden book page backed onto parchment paper, and a beautiful fussy cut flower. Some of Susie's blue lace trim, custom dyed blue, a vintage envelope from 1940, and some more journaling pieces. Gorgeous washi sticker, and another one of these journaling cards made with the delicate antique French lace in black, and some of the antique lace, French lace in this very soft aqua, and I've just threaded some chiffon ribbon through there and tied it. You could tuck something in the front, you could tuck something in the back, you could even give that as a gift, and it would make a really sweet item to add to anything, I think. It's the beauty of ephemera. You can move it around wherever you would like. Some black lace on the page edge here. I didn't use much black throughout the book, just enough to complement the cover, the lace on the cover. Another one of these sweet little tags with the locked up paper, crocheted vintage lace, and an antique lace applique with a sweet little button, and journaling space on the back. Some vintage blue lace trim, the bottom of the tuck spot, and some stamping at the top. And then look at this beautiful sari silk textile that I've used to just create a ruffle on the side. That's from Sheila's Lace bundles, and I've made a tag just using some scrapbook paper and vintage sheet music paper. A tag that I've just collaged a few pieces to and added the word vintage. One of these tall skinny tags that I've added some of the antique French lace in black with this beautiful vintage piece of jewelry. Blingy stuff, gorgeous. And here's our beautiful lady again. And I've got some vintage textile cotton that I've made a ruffle out of on the side. Sorry, 2 pages clipped together there. A ruffle on the side, some vintage sheet music, and one more tag that I've created using the index card, some vintage lace in the very soft aqua, and some blue tatting, German vintage book page, and one of the sweet little images of a lady. I believe that's by G. Kerr as well. Some seam binding in the crinkled teal color with these beautiful blingy buttons with the rhinestone centers. And then we're coming up to the last page. Thank you for staying with me this whole time. Gorgeous colors of blue. I've got a couple of journaling pieces here, a postcard and a journaling card by Tim Holtz, some stamping, and our beautiful lady in blue. And then I've got a tall tag made from vintage wallpaper, vintage book paper, locked up paper, some layering of stamping, and a wildflower die cut. And of course you can journal on the back, that is parchment paper on the back, and a beautiful envelope that I've left open. That is part of the kit from Arabella, which is by the Paper Cameo. So let's take a look at the back of this journal. You can also add something in this pocket. They are delicate because it is such fragile lace, but I tried to make them sturdy enough so that you could easily tuck something else in there. So that concludes my set of Lady in Blue journals. I hope you have enjoyed looking at them in detail. I try to describe things and go through them a little bit more thoroughly rather than just flip through. I like to explain what I do and why I make the choices that I make, but I hope you've found it interesting and that you enjoy the colors that I've chosen. And I do thank you for watching. I hope to see you again soon. Take care, my friends.